They thought they could humiliate a woman in public. But what they didn't know was that she's married to Jason Statham. And when the gang tried to walk away like nothing happened, Jason didn't speak. He acted. Stay with us until the very end, because the way he silences every single one of them will leave you speechless. The sun was slipping behind the rooftops like a secret being tucked away for the night. The town wasn't much, just a scattering of brick storefronts, old wooden signs creaking in the breeze, and a main road that seemed to stretch endlessly into nowhere. Most days it was quiet, familiar, predictable, but not today. Not on this street. Not with what was about to happen. The air smelled of engine oil, fried onions, and a faint trace of cigarette smoke, leftovers from the biker bar on the corner, where motorcycles lined up like wolves waiting to hunt. Their engines had gone cold, but the men hadn't. They leaned against chrome and concrete, clad in black leather, boots scuffed from the road, eyes scanning the street like predators bored of stillness. Laughter echoed in jagged bursts, the kind that always came too loud, too long. It wasn't joy, it was challenge. A soft bell jingled as the cafe door swung open, but no one noticed it at first. She stepped into the fading light with grace that didn't belong on a street like this. Rosie Huntington Whiteley didn't walk like she was showing off, nor like she was hiding. She moved with the ease of someone who had long ago mastered the art of being seen without offering herself up. A light cardigan rested on her shoulders, her dress fluttered slightly in the wind, and two small paper bags swayed gently at her side, one from the boutique, the other from the cafe. She didn't see them at first, or maybe she did, but she kept walking, steady as a clock, as if their presence had no bearing on her rhythm. Her heels clicked against the pavement, each step composed, each breath measured. She passed the mural of a rusting eagle painted on a cinder block wall, one wing chipped away with time, and crossed toward the narrowing part of the street. That's when the bikers noticed her. One nudged another with the back of his knuckle, another whistled low, a sound meant to pierce and provoke. They didn't expect acknowledgement. They expected discomfort, but none came. Rosie kept her eyes forward, her pace unchanged. That, of course, only fueled them. The group shifted. Boots scraped gravel. Words spilled like cheap beer. Taunts masked as jokes. Comments meant to land just below the skin. One of them called out a line so worn it practically disintegrated in the air. Another laughed too hard, slapping the chrome of his bike like it had told the joke for him. The energy shifted. It wasn't playful anymore. It was performance. They weren't talking to her. They were talking to each other, and they wanted to outdo one another. Rosie's silence was an affront to them. She didn't flinch, didn't give them the satisfaction of tension in her shoulders. She just kept walking. That's when one of them moved. He wasn't the biggest of the group, but he moved like someone who had never been stopped. A man who believed the world was still a playground, and that consequences were reserved for weaker men. He stepped off the curb with swagger borrowed from too many bar fights and too few defeats. With one careless laugh and a quick motion, he reached forward, lifting the hem of her dress like a magician revealing a trick. Everything stopped. The street fell into a hush so heavy it smothered the air. The laughter died mid-breath, hanging awkwardly like a punchline that no one wanted. Rosie froze, not in panic, not in fear, but in a silence so profound it drew a line through the moment like a blade. Her hands didn't rise to defend. Her steps didn't falter. She simply turned her head slightly, just enough to let them see her profile. Her expression wasn't shocked, it was dignified, as if to say, "You did this to yourself." The biker who touched her took a step back, as if gravity had suddenly remembered him. His grin faltered. Something in the group shifted. One of them tilted his head, studying her more closely. His smirk thinned. Recognition flickered behind his eyes, not just of her beauty, but of her dark face. He squinted, as if the sunset was playing tricks on him. Then he whispered something. It wasn't loud, but it carried, because everything else had fallen silent. No one responded. No one wanted to say her name aloud, not yet, because that would make it real. Rosie didn't say a word. She adjusted the paper bag in her hand, her spine as straight as a line drawn in sand before a storm. One of the younger bikers, not yet understanding the shift, chuckled nervously and muttered something crude, stepping forward again, like a boy daring himself to touch the flame a second time. And that's when the shadow moved. From the alleyway beside the bakery, where no one had looked, where no one had expected, it emerged slowly, purposefully. The figure didn't hurry, didn't shout, didn't stumble like a hero from a cheap movie. He walked like a clock tower tolling once, final, absolute, unignorable. The boots touched pavement first, then the coat, then the shoulders, square, silent, solid. The man stepped into the light, and for the first time that evening, no one had anything to say, because Jason Statham was already there. But just before the second biker could push further, a shadow stepped from the alleyway, slow and deliberate. Jason Statham was already there. The moment his boots touched the pavement, the air thickened like storm clouds rolling over still water. Jason Statham didn't walk with urgency or rage. He moved the way old oak trees creak in a storm, anchored, aware, unshaken. Each step was deliberate, echoing not just in the narrow street but in the chest of every man watching. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The bikers straightened slightly, some pushing off their bikes as if to seem taller. Their laughter had dried up like spit on asphalt. The one who had touched Rosie stepped back instinctively, then caught himself and tried to hide it with a scoff. But it was too late. Everyone had seen. Jason's eyes never moved from him. No one called his name. Not yet. But the silence was screaming now. The kind of silence that's not absence of sound, but the presence of consequence. Some things don't need to be said to be known. And the way Jason Statham stood, shoulders square, arms relaxed at his sides, head slightly tilted, told every man on that street one simple truth. You've already made the mistake. The leader of the group, broader in build and older by at least a decade, pushed himself to the front, puffing out his chest the way men do when they're not sure if they're about to fight or negotiate. His boots landed heavily with each step, as if he could match gravity with confidence. A tattoo of a skull grinned from beneath the torn sleeve of his vest, but his smirk didn't reach his eyes. He stood a few feet from Jason, waiting for a sign, a twitch, anything to react to. But Jason didn't offer it. He simply stood. That stillness was worse than any threat. The leader's lips curled into something meant to be a grin, but it tasted like fear. His voice cracked slightly as he tossed out a line, hoping to win back the approval of his crew, to make this feel like a game again. But no one laughed. They were watching Jason now, not like an opponent, but like a force. The kind of force you don't provoke unless you're ready to lose something you can't get back. The street felt tighter by the second. The breeze had died completely. A paper cup rolled against a tire and stopped. From the corner of the bar window, someone had begun recording. Jason's eyes didn't move, but he had already seen it all. He knew who the weak one was, who would charge first, who would hang back, who was trying too hard to act like he wasn't afraid. Years of discipline, of real violence, had trained his instincts to a point beyond guessing. He wasn't waiting, he was calculating. Then, somewhere in the back of the pack, a younger biker whispered too loudly, just enough to pierce the tension. "Isn't that Jason Statham?" A ripple passed through the group. One of them shifted his feet. Another cracked his knuckles, more out of nerves than readiness. Recognition hit them like headlights in fog. They had seen him before, on screens, in fights, behind wheels. But now he was here, real, and none of those stunts had prepared them for this moment. But pride is a parasite, and for men like them, It clings hardest when truth comes calling. The leader spat to the side, feigning bravado. So what? He bleeds like anyone else. But no one repeated him. No one echoed back. Rosie had stepped closer by now, her presence calm, commanding. She stood beside Jason, not behind, not in fear but in quiet alliance. Her gaze was fixed not on the gang but on him, as if she already knew how this would end. Her dress fluttered slightly at the hem, the same dress that had been mocked and disrespected only minutes before. And yet here she stood, untouched by panic, as if protected by something more powerful than strength, conviction. Jason glanced at her, only once, a barely visible acknowledgement that said more than words ever could. Then he turned fully to face the man who had tried to lead the pack, the one who'd smirked, who had hoped this was just another confrontation he could swagger through, and he took a step forward. That single motion sent a tremor through the group. It wasn't aggression, it was certainty. There was no threat in his posture, no anger in his breath, just the kind of calm you see before something breaks. The leader didn't back down, not yet. His pride wouldn't allow it. He stepped forward too, until they were standing almost chest to chest. And still, Jason didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't speak. His hands remained relaxed at his sides, his head tilted just slightly, watching, waiting, as if to give the man one final chance to walk away with his dignity still intact. But the man didn't take it. He cracked his knuckles, loud and deliberate like punctuation. He wanted control. He wanted to reclaim whatever power had just been stripped from him in front of his crew. He squared his shoulders, stepped forward once more, and with a crooked grin, he invited the first move. Jason didn't blink. He didn't respond. He just dropped the grocery bag at his feet. The leader cracked his knuckles, stepped forward, and challenged Jason to make the first move. Jason didn't even blink. Instead, he dropped the grocery bag at his feet. The bag hit the ground with a soft thud. Apples shifted inside, a loaf of bread tilted, and a bottle of olive oil clinked gently against the paper. It was an ordinary sound, but in that moment, it echoed like a war drum. No one moved, not even the wind. The leader stood frozen, his fists clenched, his weight balanced unevenly, like a man caught between instinct and ego. Jason didn't square up. He didn't adjust his footing. He simply breathed in, slow and centered. His eyes scanned, not as a warning, but as calculation. The kind of look forged not in street fights, but in years of discipline, in real danger, under real stakes. And then it began. Not with noise, not with a shout, but with motion, fluid, purposeful, devastating. Jason's hand rose not as an attack, but as an interruption. The leader's fist hadn't even left his waist when Jason's palm struck his wrist, twisting it outward with surgical precision. A pivot of the shoulder, a subtle shift in stance, and the man's balance collapsed beneath him like scaffolding kicked out from under. He fell sideways, not thrown, but redirected. His boots scraped asphalt, knees hitting first, elbow bending awkwardly as he tried to catch himself. His pride cracked louder than his bones. Gasps escaped from the edges of the bar. A phone slipped from someone's hand against a wooden table. The room inside pressed against the windows like breath on glass. Jason didn't even turn his head. His attention had already shifted. The second man moved too fast, rushing in with blind speed, shoulder aimed low, like a brawler used to overwhelming opponents with bulk. But Jason was water. He sidestepped cleanly, letting the weight pass him like wind through trees. Then came the response. Not violent, not showy, just precise. A sharp elbow found the man's ribcage. Air shot from his lungs like a punctured tire. His legs buckled mid-stride and his body crumpled to the side, coughing, eyes wide in shock rather than pain. The third didn't hesitate. He lunged while Jason was still turning, a fist already raised, teeth gritted. He thought he saw an opening. He didn't realize Jason had given it to him. The punch never landed. Jason's hand caught the man's wrist mid-air, fingers locking around it like steel closing on a gear, and in one seamless motion he rotated, ducked, and brought the biker's arm behind his back. The sound was not of bones breaking, but of will bending. Jason held him there briefly, not to hurt him, but to remind him. Then he let go. The man stumbled backward, clutching his arm, blinking in disbelief at how fast it had happened. His mouth opened to speak, but nothing came out. Rosie hadn't moved. She stood by the curb, framed by the glow of a street lamp, her shadow long behind her, eyes fixed only on Jason. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. The moment had become a painting, and she was its calm center, unmoving, untouched. The others began to shift now, the ones who hadn't stepped forward, the ones who had laughed loudest before anything started. Their eyes darted to each other, unsure if they should help, attack, or pretend they hadn't been part of this at all. The line between bravado and survival had never looked so thin. Inside the bar, more phones had appeared, faces pressed to the windows, mouths half open, waiting. No one wanted to interfere, but no one wanted to miss it either. Jason looked around, not with a glare, but with a glance that swept across every man left standing. He didn't speak, but his stillness was its own kind of language. A question, a dare, a promise. Are we done? None of them stepped forward. One by one, their eyes dropped. Shoulders softened, feet shifted, and the air, once sharp with anticipation, began to breathe again. Jason turned, his back exposed, his guard lowered. He walked slowly toward the brown paper bag lying peacefully near the curb. Rosie's eyes followed him, her breath steady, as if the whole moment had passed exactly how she expected. He knelt calmly, reached down, and lifted the bag, checking first to make sure nothing inside had been damaged. A bruised apple. Nothing more. He stood again, brushing a bit of dust from his pant leg. It should have been over. It would have been over. But pride dies slow. Behind them, near the edge of the alley, a figure hadn't moved. The youngest of the group, barely old enough to shave, with fresh tattoos and something to prove. His eyes burned, not with anger, but desperation. He hadn't fought yet. He hadn't had his moment. And that silence, that humiliation, that calm walking away, it felt like poison in his throat. His fingers reached under his jacket. They found the cold length of a chain, thick, rusted, wrapped twice around his waist. He pulled it free, letting it unravel with a metallic whisper. No one saw him move at first, but Jason did. He heard it, and as he turned to walk with Rosie, steps aligned, shoulders relaxed, the chain rose in the air, aimed for his back with reckless speed and youthful vengeance. As Jason turned to leave with Rosie, one last biker, the youngest, the most reckless, pulled a concealed chain from his belt and lunged at him. The chain sliced through the air like a whip laced with rust and rage. The boy swung it not with precision but with panic, muscles tight, teeth clenched, the last ember of pride flaring in a desperate arc. It gleamed briefly in the glow of the street lamp, catching the world's breath for just a second. Jason didn't turn. He didn't need to. His body reacted like the strike was part of a rhythm he'd known his whole life. A slight pivot, a subtle duck of the shoulder, and the chain missed by inches. The air split in its place, cracking like a gunshot, but it hit nothing, only the space where calm had been. Before the boy could reset, before his grip could tighten again, Jason moved, not with fury, not with chaos, but with the devastating control of a storm that chooses where to land. His arm reached back, intercepted the chain mid-swing, and yanked it downward with force that belonged to a world beyond weightlifting. The boy stumbled forward, off balance, exposed. Jason stepped into the space between them, grabbed the boy's collar, and redirected his momentum into the pavement. It wasn't a slam. It was a lesson delivered through gravity, sharp, clean, final. The chain clattered beside him. The boy's face pressed against the warm asphalt, eyes wide, lungs gasping for air that now seemed too thick to breathe. He wasn't bleeding, he wasn't broken, but something inside him had fractured in a way that wouldn't show up on scans. Jason held him there, not long, just long enough for the truth to settle in. Then, as calmly as he had arrived, Jason released his grip and stood. He didn't look down. He didn't gloat. The thunder had rolled, and now the silence returned, deeper than before, heavier with understanding. Around them, the street stood still. No one cheered. No one moved. The weight of respect had finally filled the space where arrogance once stood. Inside the bar, every phone was still recording, but no one dared speak. The people behind the glass watched not a man win a fight, but a man end one, without saying a word. Jason turned, dusted his hands once, and walked toward Rosie. She hadn't moved. She watched him approach with the same stillness she had carried from the beginning, like a flame that never flickered even in the wind. As he reached her, she gave a subtle nod, not in praise, not in gratitude, but in complete knowing. The kind of look only two people who've survived long enough together can share. Together, they walked. No one stopped them. No one dared. Each step was slow, deliberate, echoing softly in the breathless street. Jason still carried the grocery bag in one hand, his other hand briefly brushing Rosie's as they reached the edge of the lot. Their truck waited under a flickering light, old, clean, powerful, like them. They climbed in without haste. No engine revving, no tire screeching. Just the door closing with a click that sounded somehow like the final word in a long, one-sided conversation. And then the truck rolled away. The dust in their wake didn't rise. It settled. Behind them, the town began to breathe again. Someone in the bar whispered, "That was Jason Statham." Another answered, not with words, but with a quiet shake of the head, because it hadn't been a performance. It hadn't been a scene from a movie. It had been something else entirely, something real. The boy on the ground sat up slowly. His fingers touched the chain, then released it. His shoulders curled inward, not in pain, but in realization. Around him, the others didn't offer hands. They didn't help. They simply watched, because they understood now that strength didn't live in noise or numbers. It lived in presence, in control, in silence. And Rosie? She was no longer just a woman in a dress. Someone finally said her name out loud. Someone pulled up an old cover of a fashion magazine. Someone whispered, "That's her. That's Rosie Huntington Whiteley." And just like that, the story began to take shape. By midnight, the first clips were online. Titles varied, but the message was the same. Silent strength still exists. Real men protect without speaking. Jason Statham silences entire biker gang with his bare hands. The algorithm did its work. Within an hour, hundreds of thousands had watched. By dawn, it was millions. But none of the captions could capture what really happened. Not the chain, not the strikes, not even the fall. It was something quieter, deeper, something in the way Jason had never raised his voice, never looked for a camera, never demanded an apology. He had simply acted and walked away. Somewhere in the town, a gas station attendant replayed the video with wide eyes. A woman at a diner whispered the story to her daughter. Two teenage boys debated whether it was staged or real, until the older one said, "You can't fake that kind of calm." And at the edge of the crowd, away from the screens and voices, a father stood beside his young son. The boy's hand was tucked in his father's palm, eyes still fixed on the street where it all happened. He didn't say much, just one thing, a whisper, soft, true. "Dad, I want to grow up and be like him." What you just witnessed wasn't revenge. It was restraint. It wasn't about showing off. It was about standing up with dignity. And if you believe the world needs more silent strength like Jason's, don't forget to hit our subscribe button now, because this story doesn't end here. The next chapter is already unfolding, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.